Hey everybody. Alright, today I'm going to be giving a quick tutorial on inking line art with a brush. Now I'll be showing a few introductory techniques and methods for general inking, and I want to keep this as concise as possible, so I'm going to be moving pretty quickly through it all. So just try to keep up, that's all I can say. Now, I understand there's a fear in brush inking. Now, like most people, I had originally taught myself how to ink with one of these, a micron pen. Now, since no one ever gave me any instructions on how to properly use a brush, the idea kind of freaked me out, and for a long time, the brush and any sort of painting techniques were the bane of my existence. I'd pick them up and I would have no idea where to even start, so I couldn't use it, couldn't figure it out for myself. So chances are, if you have a fear of the brush, these things here, or a similar item, are your tool of choice for inking. Now, I know plenty of artists who swear by the micron pens, and I'm not here to say which method is better than the other. It's just that my personal preference lies with inking with a brush. So that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do today. So put this aside for now. Now, first off, you'll need a certain type of brush. The Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. Specifically the size 1 or 2. Get the 2 for general line art and the 1 for more finer details. Now, this specific kind of brush is preferred for line art by comic artists because the sable fibers hold a much better point and have a slight curve to the tip, which gives you better control over line weight variations. Now, the only thing is that they can be kind of expensive in retail, like we're talking $25 to $30 for a single brush. So you're going to have a little bit of a harder time finding it in a normal art store. So take a look around online, like on Dick Blick or other places like that. You can find them for half that price, generally, if you find it online. So they usually have sales. You can get lucky and find them. So, anywho, for your ink, you're going to want to stick with waterproof black India ink. And there are a number of brands you can choose from. It's all personal preference, since they're all the same for the most part. The first kind that I used was Higgins because it was the most inexpensive. But after a while, I found it wasn't a true enough black. It was kind of gray and washed out. And it has a tendency to also sour after a few months if you buy one of the larger reservoirs, and it ended up smelling like really bad wine. So I stopped using it. Nowadays, I use the Winsor Newton ink. Everything's Winsor Newton, isn't it? Well, yes, sponsored by Winsor Newton. Winsor Newton black ink. This is actually a very true black, waterproof, and it's very good for line art. It holds a very steady line, very clean line. Also, I use Bombay ink because it's good in washes, and it comes in a number of colors that I use specifically for the Chronicles of Audemars. So this is the brown variation that I use to get the sepia tone for all the pages. So yes, one trick that I learned when you're doing brush inking, and it's one that drives my SCAD professors a little crazy, is to let the ink dry on your brush after you use it. Now what this does is it actually holds the shape of the brush and keeps it safer during transportation, so it holds it steady, so it doesn't let it bend or get smushed against the side of the case, and when you pick it out, it holds its shape after you get the ink off of it. So it won't be an issue obviously the first time you get it because there's not going to be any ink on there, but afterwards you're going to want to just dust it off on the side of the table real quick just to get the excess ink off, and then take the rest off with your fingers, and you should see that you have a good clean tip. After you do this, just spin the fibers on your tongue for a couple seconds to reform the shape of the bristles to a point. Now I know most of you probably think it's a horrible idea to get ink on your tongue, and it's pretty much guaranteed that you'll get a little bit from the bristles, just from the residue. But I've never known any ink to be toxic, and it's not like it's going to hurt you. It doesn't have a flavor, so just man up and you'll be fine. Do it a couple times. Okay. So for this demo, I'm going to be using a blank piece of Bristol vellum. This is the best in my opinion, since the vellum texture grips the ink a bit better than the smooth Bristol. Now, any kind of Bristol, again, that's up to personal preference. I'm not saying vellum's better than smooth, but generally Bristol board is the best I've found for line art because the ink has a good grip on it regardless of what the texture is, and it's sturdy enough that you can draw a large-scale comic page and not have to worry about running out of room or having it bend or get all messed up if you're erasing hard on it. And it's a good solid paper for scanning. It's just general quality. You can find them in bundles of various sizes, and they're pretty cheap. So keeping on the Bristol, okay, to start, you dip your brush into the inkwell about to the base of the brush, base of the bristles. This will get about, yay much, a little bit past the middle, and then wipe off the excess on a taped down piece of paper towel. Sometimes I can go a good length of time with the same piece of paper towel here. So also, while you're doing this, while you're wiping off the excess, make sure that you twist the bristles to keep that point. Don't just drag it straight across the paper, because you'll end up getting a flattened tip. Now that can be helpful for certain things, but mostly you'll want it to keep that fine point. Now, when you ink, hold the brush towards the tip, hold it up closer to the tip, and keep the brush as close to a 90-degree angle to the paper as possible. Now, the most important thing you have to remember here is don't move your wrist when you ink. Keep your wrist frozen in place and move your entire arm. And that will give you a good, clean, steady line. See? Well, kind of see. Yep, there you go. Now, as you move, you're going to want to keep your arm frozen in place. Consciously try to move from your shoulder and your elbow. Keep your wrist and your hand frozen in place. Keep it as steady as possible in order to get the smoothest line that you can. By doing this, you can get a clean, steady line that most people think, how can you do that with a brush? Well, that's how. You just got to train yourself to think not to move your wrist. Because if you move with your wrist, you'll see that you actually get a lot of variations, like the thick and thin lines, and you end up with really choppy line weights most of the time. Now, that can be, an effect that you're going for, but sometimes, actually most of the time, you'll want something a little bit smoother than that. So, just keep the tip on the paper as you move, and you'll find that you can get a good amount of control over the line weight. Use a few pieces of paper just to practice different weights and textures. Do little series of lines and dashes just to try to keep them all as uniform as possible, and just practice with keeping your hand control in line, and pretty soon you'll be doing pretty good with it. Now, the other good thing is that the Winsor Newton ink also dries remarkably quickly. So, as you're working, you won't have to worry so much about dragging your hand across the paper and smearing the ink. It's already dry. It just takes about 15 seconds and it'll be done. If you blow on it, it dries even quicker. So, it's really not that big of an issue. Hey, let me try moving this out of the way. Maybe that'll help. Okay, now you can see it a little bit better. Okay. Actually helped out a lot. So yes, as you're doing this, just make sure that you get a number of different textures here. Try doing straight lines like this, and try practicing with going from thin to a thicker line weight just by applying more pressure. Try doing dotted lines. Just little practices. Fill up an entire page with various textures and patterns, and just work on your control. That's all this exercise is about, is training your hand to move, because once you figure out how to get the basics down and you have a good amount of control and regularity with your line weights, then the rest of it can come easily. You'll learn to walk before you can run. So, I'm not going to go too deep into the different techniques and whatnot for getting different textures. I'm just showing you the basics here. So, other fancy techniques will come with another tutorial later on. So, let's see. Get some more textures here. For right now, again, just start with little textures here. Start off with doing some cross hatching and getting a good feel for the paper, get a good feel for the brush, and just practice on your own. Now, you'll notice also as you go along, you'll get these sort of broken lines, like it'll get dry on the tip of the brush. That's your sign that you need to redip it. But also, if you can use this for some good texture work if you have the dry tip of the brush. So, that's about it. I mean, just mess around with it on your own, get a good feel for it, but that's pretty much all you need to know to ink with a brush. It's always daunting the first time you play around with a new medium, so practice with it, you'll get the hang of it in time. It's a completely different feel compared to inking with a pen, so don't get discouraged if it takes you a little while. So, thanks for watching, and good luck.